The temperature was 14 below zero and dropping. 12 of the most elite soldiers on the planet were pinned down, bleeding, dying in the snow. And their only hope was a 15-year-old girl they had spent the last 6 hours mocking. She didn't flinch, didn't beg them to believe her. She simply pressed her cheek against the stock of a rifle nearly as long as she was tall, exhaled once into the frozen dark, and sent a bullet through a man's skull at 800 meters. The laughter stopped. If you've never subscribed to this channel, right now is the moment, because the story you're about to hear will stay with you long after it ends. Hit that like button, drop your city and country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And stay with me until the last word. The helicopter banked hard into the mountain corridor, and every man aboard felt his stomach drop. Outside the frost-rimmed windows, the Hindu Kush range stretched in every direction like a broken jawline. Ridgelines sharp enough to cut, valleys so deep the darkness inside them seemed to generate its own cold. Wind shear hammered the fuselage in irregular bursts, and the MH-60 Blackhawk compensated with small, violent corrections that made the cargo netting sway, and the men sitting against the walls pressed their boots into the deck for grip. There were 7 of them in the back. SEAL Team 7. Bravo Element. Every one of them had been in bad places before. Kandahar. Mosul. 3 rotations across the Kunar Valley where the mountains themselves seemed to want you dead. They wore the kind of calm that came not from comfort, but from repetition, from having been scared often enough that fear had become a familiar texture rather than an emergency. Commander Ethan Cole sat nearest the starboard door, one knee up, a tablet strapped to his forearm displaying the satellite overlay of their objective. He was 41, built like a man who'd been compressed by years of weight and rucksacks and bad sleep into something dense and economical. There wasn't a loose thing about him. Not his kit, not his face, not the way his eyes moved across that map without ever quite going still. Beside him, Master Chief Marcus Webb leaned his head back against the fuselage and stared at the ceiling like a man cataloging his grievances. Webb had 9 years in the teams. He was the kind of operator who made difficult things look boring, which Cole had always found both reassuring and faintly dangerous. Next to Webb sat Petty Officer Darnell Hicks, the team's comms specialist, running one last check on the encrypted radio pack strapped to his chest, his lips moving slightly, counting frequencies. The rest of the element, Torres, Nguyen, Faraday, Kowalski, occupied the opposite bench, weapons angled across their laps, each man inside his own pre-mission silence. Cole checked his watch. 14 minutes to infill. The objective was a farmhouse complex 6 kilometers north of Lalwa Sarjangal, a cluster of buildings tucked into a secondary valley at 9,400 feet that Signals Intelligence had flagged 3 days ago as the location of a captured NGO worker named James Holcroft. British national, 47, diabetic. The agency's assessment was that Holcroft had roughly 72 hours of survivable captivity remaining before either his health collapsed or his captors decided he was more trouble than he was worth. The operational window was tonight. It was supposed to be a 6-man extraction. Get in, verify the hostage, extract under air cover, be back at the FOB before first light. Supposed to be. Cole pulled his earpiece and keyed his radio. Phoenix Actual, this is Bravo 6, radio check over. Static. Then the JTAC's voice, flat and professional. Bravo 6, Phoenix Actual, you're coming in clear. Be advised. Your long-range support asset is already on the ground. Set up at grid November Juliet 447902. She's been in position for 3 hours. Cole frowned at the tablet. She. Say again, Phoenix. Did you say she? Affirm, Bravo 6. Support shooter is call sign Hollow Point. Mission jacket says she's been read in and cleared. No further details on this net. Webb opened one eye. Did he just say she? Cole didn't answer immediately. He ran the grid on his tablet, confirmed the position. A ridge line about 900 meters northeast of the objective. Elevated, good sight line to the approach. Technically correct placement. Solid overwatch position. He'd chosen it himself during mission planning. Bravo 6 copies, he said into the radio. Any additional info on the asset? Negative. She's cleared. She's yours. Phoenix Actual out. Cole lowered the radio and looked at his tablet, then at Webb. Well, Webb said, closing his eye again, that's a new one. The Black Hawk landed in a depression between two ridge lines, rotors kicking up a horizontal wall of powdered snow that reduced visibility to arm's length. The team fast roped the last 12 feet, hit the ground in a spread pattern, and moved off the landing zone in 60 seconds flat. The helicopter climbed immediately, vanishing into the overcast. Cold hit them like a physical thing. Not gradual, not transitional, but immediate, total. The kind of cold that found every gap in your gear within the first 30 seconds and settled there. Temperature was somewhere between -10 and -15 Celsius, and the wind off the upper ridgeline carried ice crystals that stung exposed skin like static discharge. Cole took point on the movement north. The team moved in a patrol column, 100-meter intervals between elements, boots in the snow making sounds that felt too loud in the silence. He'd done winter mountain work in Norway during BUD/S pre-deployment training, and in the Kunar in January 4 years ago, but this felt different. The valley had the peculiar deadened quiet of a place that absorbed sound. No echo, no resonance, just white and dark and wind. They reached the Overwatch ridgeline after 40 minutes of movement, and Cole signaled a halt. She was already there. He almost missed her. That was the first thing that registered. Not what she looked like, but the fact that she'd built herself into the terrain so thoroughly that he'd scanned the ridgeline twice before he saw the faint outline of a ghillie cloak pressed flat against the rock shelf, mottled white and gray to match the snow. A spotter's scope lay beside her, small and precise. The rifle itself was partially snow-covered, which meant she'd been lying still long enough for accumulation to begin. Professional cold weather concealment. He filed that away automatically. She rolled onto her side when she heard the team's approach signal, 3 short clicks on the radio, and pulled down the buff covering her face. 15 years old. Maybe. She had the kind of face that age hadn't finished deciding on yet. Sharp angles fighting with youth, eyes a gray-green that caught the ambient light from the snow and held it. Not afraid. Not nervous. She looked at Cole the way a contractor looks at a client, evaluating, not deferential. She sat up and extended her hand. Hollow point. You're Bravo 6? Cole shook it. Her grip was firm, which was the least surprising thing about her. Commander Cole, you've been in position since 2100, she said. 3 hours. I've been watching the objective. She reached for her spotter's scope and pointed northeast. You want what I've seen? Before Cole could answer, Webb came up on Cole's left shoulder and got his first look. There was a pause, then quietly, to Cole. Sir, she's a kid. I'm aware, Master Chief. Like, actually, I'm standing right here, Maya said. She didn't raise her voice. Didn't look at Webb with anything that resembled hurt or anger. She looked at him the way you look at weather, acknowledging it without being changed by it. Do you want my report or not? Webb stared at her for a moment. What's your name? Call sign Hollow Point. Your name. She looked back at the objective. Maya. Now do you want what I've got or not, because the wind's been shifting every 20 minutes and you're on a pattern. Next shift in about 6. Torres had come up by then. He looked at Maya, looked at the rifle, a .338 Lapua Magnum precision system that was, in fact, nearly as tall as she was when she stood, and then looked at Cole with an expression that said, You're joking without committing to the words. Cole ignored it. Give me your report. Maya turned the spotter's scope and talked while she adjusted. The complex has 4 structures. Main house is where the thermal signature consistent with a sedentary adult has been located for the last 2 hours. Northeast corner room, ground level. 2 structures to the west are being used for personnel. I've counted movement consistent with 6 to 8 individuals across both buildings. The 4th structure, the one closest to the vehicle track, has been visited 3 times in the last 2 hours by 2 individuals each time and shows no residual heat retention afterward, storage or equipment. Cole crouched beside her, looking through his own monocular at the distant cluster of low, flat-roofed buildings. Vehicle track status? 1 technical parked at the south end. Hasn't moved. I saw a guard rotation at the main house at 22:30. Two men, one on the north corner, one walking the perimeter. The walker goes around every 18 minutes, not consistent. Sometimes 17, sometimes 20. He stops at the east corner every circuit, looks up. I think he's heard aircraft before. He's jumpy. What about the ridge to the north? Cole asked. The high ground. Maya hesitated, just a fraction. I've been watching it. And? I haven't confirmed anything, but the snow up there disturbs in a pattern that doesn't match wind alone. Could be animals, could be nothing. She paused. Probably not nothing. Webb crouched down now, close, looking through his own rifle's optic at the ridge she'd indicated. The ridge was steep, forested, pine trees at altitude, heavy with snow. You're saying you think there's people up there based on snow disturbance. I'm saying it's not zero. That's a lot of maybe for mission planning. Maya looked at him directly. The maybe is why I'm telling you. If you want to go in without accounting for it, that's your call, Master Chief. I'm giving you what I've got. A silence fell between them. The wind moved through it. Cole stood up. Hicks, get me Phoenix Actual. I want to know if there's been any updated traffic on that northern ridge line. There hadn't been. The agency's most recent pass put 0 signatures on the northern approach. But that pass was 4 hours old, and at altitude in winter, a force that knew what it was doing could move into a prepared position in under 90 minutes without generating the thermal profile that would flag a satellite review. Cole knew this. He ran the calculation. The operational window was shrinking. Holcroft's health assessment gave a hard degradation timeline. The weather was moving. The barometric pressure had been dropping for 2 hours, which meant the upper-level system sitting over the Pamir Plateau was pushing south. If they didn't execute in the next 3 hours, they'd be looking at a whiteout insertion and an extraction in full storm. He made the call. We execute on schedule. Hollow Point, you maintain overwatch. Primary threat axis is the main house and the 2 personnel buildings. Secondary, that northern ridge. If anything moves up there, I want to know before it becomes a problem. Maya was already back against her rifle, her eye at the scope. Understood. You've got this range? I've got to 1,400 at these conditions. Tonight, conservatively, 1,100 effective. The wind's your issue more than my distance. Torres laughed. It wasn't a big laugh, just a small, private one that he didn't bother hiding. 1,100 meters, sure, kid. Maya didn't respond. She moved her eye away from the scope long enough to note the wind in her logbook. A small green notebook, half frozen, entries tight and precise, and then returned to her scope. Cole gave Torres a look. Torres shrugged. They moved out. What? The approach to the objective took 53 minutes. They moved in 2 elements, Cole, Webb, and Hicks, taking the eastern route along a dry stream bed. Torres, Nguyen, Faraday, and Kowalski taking a wider northern arc that would put them on the near side of the personnel buildings to prevent reinforcement of the main house once the breach element went in. Maya's voice came through the earpiece at irregular intervals, not constant, not the kind of check-ins that clogged the frequency, but when she talked, it was because something had changed. Walker just completed a circuit, 14 minutes that time. He's speeding up. Cole acknowledged with a single click. North corner guard changed posture. He's looking west now. Could be audio. Winds shifted. 1 click. Your southern element is about to cross a line of sight from the vehicle track. There's nobody in the technical, but if the south door of Building 2 opens, they've got exposure. Cole keyed immediately. Torres, hold. Torres's voice clipped. Holding. 30 seconds passed. Then Maya again. Door stayed closed. You're clear. Torres moved. Cole paused in the stream bed, listening. 2 meters above him, the bank was a solid wall of compacted snow and frozen clay. He could hear nothing from the objective, which was both good and appropriate. A quiet target was a target that hadn't been alerted. He thought about the northern ridgeline. He thought about Maya saying probably not nothing and the calm with which she'd said it. Webb materialized at his shoulder. He had a way of moving in terrain that Cole had always found faintly supernatural. 4 tours of mountain work had turned the man into something close to a natural feature. He didn't make noise. He arrived. You're thinking about the ridge, Webb said, very quietly. I'm thinking about the window. Those aren't mutually exclusive. No, Cole said. They're not. They moved on. The breach team stacked on the main house door at 1:14 local time. Cole went first, Webb second, Hicks covering the angle to the personnel buildings. The door was wooden, old, warped, held by a simple latch. Cole breached it with one controlled kick that sent it inward and stepped through the threshold into darkness and animal smell and cold. The room opened from a short hallway into two sections. Cole moved right, Webb left, the pair sweeping opposite corners in the practiced split-second choreography of 1,000 hours of CQB training. Clear, clear. Second room. A man was sleeping on a cot against the far wall. He came awake fast, faster than most civilians, and Cole had half a second to register that before he crossed the distance and got control of him. Not a guard. Not armed. The man was pale, damp with fever sweat, wearing clothes that were clearly not his own. 2 sizes large, torn at the knee. Holcroft. James Holcroft. Cole kept his voice low. British national. We're Americans. We're here to take you out. The man stared at him. His eyes were glassy with either fever or shock. His lips cracked from dehydration. He tried to say something and managed, Yes, how did you... We'll talk outside, Cole said. Can you walk? I think so. My left knee's... I'll take his weight, Webb said, already moving to Holcroft's side, pulling the man's arm over his shoulder. Hicks's voice came through, clipped and precise. North building, movement, 1 Tango, doorway, doesn't look alarmed yet. He might be taking a leak. Cole keyed once. Not alarmed. They still had time. Extract element, we've got the package. Moving to exfil corridor in 60 seconds. Torres acknowledged. The secondary element had eyes on both personnel buildings and the vehicle track. So far, quiet. 60 seconds. Just 60 seconds. Then Maya's voice came through the earpiece, and the tone of it changed everything. Bravo 6. Flat. No inflection. That was how she'd sounded all night. Flat, precise, professional. But something in the single beat of silence after his call sign made Cole stop moving. Hollow Point, send it. The Northern Ridge. I've got movement. Multiple contacts. I can't... A pause, half a second. I'm counting at least 12 heat signatures moving south along the tree line. They're moving fast. They're not trying to hide anymore. Cole looked at Webb across the darkness of the room. Holcroft was on his feet between them, swaying. 12 contacts. Moving fast. The math was immediate and ugly. His team was 7. One of those 7 was currently carrying a sick British hostage. His long-range support was a 15-year-old girl on a ridgeline 900 meters out, and 12 enemy fighters who had apparently been watching them insert, watching them approach, watching them breach, were now moving down from the north with a speed that suggested they'd been waiting. Not for the team to fail. For the team to succeed. Get the hostage. Commit to the extract. Walk into the kill zone. Bravo 6, Maya's voice again. Steady. Almost too steady. They're not flanking. They're cutting off the exfil corridor. If you take your planned route out, you're going to hit them head-on in the open. Cole grabbed Holcroft's collar and moved for the door. All elements. Bravo 6, change of plan. We are compromised. This was a trap. Break contact, move to alternate exfil. Grid November Juliet 450-915. Acknowledge. Torres immediately. Solid copy. Faraday. Moving. Nguyen. On Torres. Hicks at his elbow. Sir, the guy in the north building just went back inside. If he's going for a radio... He is, Cole said. Run. They ran. The first explosion came 8 seconds later. It came from the south, not the north, a flat, sharp detonation that punched the night air and lit the snow orange for a full 3 seconds. The vehicle track. The technical. Somebody had blown it as a signal, or blown it to close the southern route, or blown it because the ambush had a second element Cole hadn't accounted for. He was still running, Holcroft stumbling between him and Webb, when the machine gun opened up from the tree line on the eastern slope. Not the north. The east. There was a third element. The rounds came in high, chewing through the snow above their heads, and then walking down as the gunner corrected. And Cole hit the deck and pulled Holcroft down beside him and heard Webb grunt and felt the sudden change in the man's movement that meant he'd been hit. "Webb, I'm good. It's my shoulder. Keep moving." "How bad?" "I said I'm good. Keep moving." From the earpiece, Maya's voice, and for the first time all night, there was something other than flatness in it. Something tight and fast that might have been fear or might have been the sound of someone running through calculations at speed. "I see the eastern gun position. Do I have clearance?" Cole was already moving, half crawling toward a collapsed stone wall 40 meters ahead. Tracer fire crossed overhead in arcs of orange. From the north he could hear Torres's team engaging. Rifle fire, close, disciplined, not panicked. "Bravo 6, do I have clearance on the eastern gun?" "You're clear," Cole said. "Take it." There was a pause. 4 seconds. 5. The machine gun was still firing, still walking toward them, and Cole was counting the distance to the wall and running a survival calculation on whether they'd make it before the gunner corrected again. Then the machine gun stopped. Not suppressed. Not paused. Stopped. Continue. The silence from the eastern slope lasted 3 seconds before the crew-served weapons assistant gunner tried to take over. And then that stopped too, with a sharp finality that carried even over the distance and the wind. 2 shots. That's what Cole registered. 2 shots at range, in a crosswind, at a moving target behind what had to be partial cover, and the eastern gun was gone. Over the radio, nothing from Maya, just silence. Professional silence. Cole got them to the wall. He pressed his back against the frozen stone, pulled Holcroft down beside him, and checked Webb's shoulder with a gloved hand. The round had caught the back of the deltoid. Through and through, didn't feel like it had hit the joint, but the arm was going to be limited. Webb had already packed it himself, one-handed, with the compressed gauze from his plate carrier. His face was pale and set. "Can you shoot?" "Left hand if I have to." "You're going to have to." From the north, Torres's element was still engaged. Cole could hear the rhythm of their fire, disciplined and spaced, which meant they were holding but not advancing. He keyed the radio. "Torres, sit rep." "Got 4 tangos pinned in the tree line about 250 north. They're not advancing, but they're not breaking either. We're good for now. How's the package?" Holcroft was flat against the wall beside Cole, knees drawn up, eyes wide but not gone. Cole looked at him directly for 1 second. The man held the look. "Okay. Good." "Package is mobile," Cole said. "We're moving to alternate in 30 seconds. Can you break contact and follow?" "Give me 90. These guys have us bracketed. I've got to suppress before I can move Faraday." He caught some debris, his eyes messed up. 90 seconds. Then you move, eyes or not. Copy." Cole looked at Hicks beside him. Hicks was holding the radio pack with one hand and a rifle with the other, scanning over the wall. "Phoenix actual?" Cole asked. "Already on them," Hicks said. "QRF is spinning up. ETA 45 minimum. Weather's degrading. They might not get rotors off." 45 minutes, probably longer. In the open, in winter, under fire, with a sick hostage and a wounded team member. Cole looked at the sky for 1 second. The cloud deck had dropped noticeably, even in the last 20 minutes. The storm system was accelerating south. "Bravo 6, Maya's voice. "I've got the northern element partially in view. 8 individuals now in the open moving down the slope toward your secondary exfil. They must have a second route." "Can you slow them?" "A beat. 2 beats. Not hesitation. Calculation." "I can engage. Range is about 950 with this wind. I can give you maybe 3 minutes before they go back into cover." "Do it." "Moving to secondary position. Give me 40 seconds. 40 seconds. Cole counted. The night around him was noise and cold and the orange pulse of muzzle flash from the tree line where Torres was still holding. Holcroft had pressed himself small against the wall in a way that told Cole the man had been in conflict zones before. He wasn't trying to run, wasn't making noise, wasn't asking questions. Just waiting. Good. Webb was reloading one-handed with a precision that was almost offensive given that he'd been shot 11 minutes ago. At 38 seconds, Maya's rifle spoke. Cole heard it faintly, A flat crack carried on the wind from the ridgeline, high and to the northeast. Then again, 5 seconds later. Then again. The shots weren't rapid. Each one had its own space, its own deliberation. Each one meant something. 4 down, 4 seeking cover in the rocks. You've got your window. Moving, Cole said. He grabbed Holcroft's arm, got him to his feet. Webb, you're on his right. Hicks, you've got rear. We go now. They went. The alternate exfil route took them south and west, away from the initial approach, following a shallow ridgeline that offered intermittent cover. It was rough ground, uneven footing beneath the snow, hidden rocks and frozen creek stones that turned ankles, and Holcroft moved with the compensated gait of a man who'd been confined and was running on adrenaline and prayer. Webb kept pace beside him, despite the shoulder, jaw set, breathing controlled through his nose. Hicks moved behind them, turning every 20 meters to check the rear. They were 200 meters from the alternate exfil point when Torres came back on the radio. Breaking contact now. Faraday's with me. One eye still functional. ETA to your position, 6 minutes. Copy. Come in from the south. 6 minutes. Cole could work with 6 minutes. Maya's voice, quiet. Northern elements moving again. They found another route. They're about 6 minutes behind Torres's element. Can you still engage? I'm moving again. New position. Give me a pause, and for the first time that night, Cole heard something physical in the transmission. Her breathing. Fast. She was running in snow. Give me 2 minutes. You've got one. Silence. Then, from somewhere closer than before, she'd moved downslope, cut her distance. Her rifle cracked once, then twice. Then the radio crackled and she said, "They've stopped again. I've got maybe 4 minutes before they decide to rush instead of suppress." "That's enough," Cole said. "Phoenix Actual, this is Bravo 6. Package is mobile, moving to alternate LZ. Request immediate extract." "Bravo 6, Phoenix Actual. We've got a problem. Leadbird is reporting 40-knot gusts at your altitude. They're making one approach attempt. One. After that, they're going to the secondary LZ 5 kilometers south, and you're walking." Cole looked at Webb. Webb looked back. "Then they'd better not miss," Cole said. Whumped. The LZ was a frozen meadow tucked between 2 rock faces. Natural windbreak on 3 sides, open to the south, where the helicopter would come in. Cole set the team up in a defensive perimeter around Holcroft, weapons out, while Hicks popped an IR strobe that only the helicopter crew's NVGs would see. Torres's element came in from the south exactly on time, Faraday moving with his hand over his left eye, the other bright and alert. Torres himself was bleeding from a cut above his ear. He pointed at it when Cole looked, shook his head. Nothing. Cole nodded. They were all there, minus Maya. Cole looked at the ridge line to the northeast. He couldn't see anything through the darkness and weather, but she was out there somewhere, lying in the snow, alone, buying them minutes with a rifle. He keyed the radio. "Hollow Point, Bravo 6, what's your status?" A longer pause than he liked. "I've been moving. I'm going to be honest with you, Commander. I'm not sure exactly where the northern element is right now. I think I've been buying you time, but I can't see them anymore. The snow's too heavy. Can you make it to the LZ? I'm about 800 meters northeast. How long is your window?" Cole looked at Hicks, who had the pilot on a separate channel. Hicks held up 3 fingers. 3 minutes, maybe 4. A pause that felt longer than it was. "I can make that." "Run," Cole said. He turned back to the perimeter and found Torres beside him. Torres looked at him without speaking for a moment. "She's been keeping them off us all night," Cole said. Torres nodded slowly. He didn't say anything else. The helicopter came in fast and low, rotors beating against the gusts in a way that sounded wrong, labored, fighting the weather. The crew wasn't being cautious. They were committed to this approach and pushing through it because they'd been told to. The skids hit the snow and bounced and settled, and the crew chief was already at the door waving them in. Cole put Holcroft on first, then Faraday, then the rest. He stayed outside. Webb was at his shoulder. "Sir, I know. We've got maybe 90 seconds before they have to go. I know. She's..." A shape came out of the snow, running, small. The ghillie cloak was gone. She must have shed it to move faster. She was carrying the rifle across her chest in both arms, running with the controlled, heavy-footed stride of someone who'd been in deep snow for hours and whose legs were burning but who hadn't decided to stop yet. Behind her, maybe 300 meters back, Cole could see movement in the snowfall, dark shapes, figures pushing through the white. She hit the perimeter, and Cole grabbed her arm, and they were both moving for the helicopter. Go, go, go! The helicopter lifted before the door fully closed. The crew chief hauled it shut as the aircraft climbed, and the sudden loss of ground and roar of rotors and controlled chaos of 9 people in a space built for 6 compressed everything into a single dense moment. Cole looked out the frost-rimmed window as the LZ dropped away below them. The dark shapes in the snow reached the meadow and stood there, looking up. He turned. Maya Voss was sitting against the far wall of the helicopter's interior, rifle across her knees, ghillie cloak gone, her face blotched red from cold and exertion, and something else. Not quite crying, not quite not. She was looking at her hands. Hey, Cole said. She looked up. Good work tonight. She didn't say thank you. She didn't smile. She looked at him for a moment with those gray-green eyes that had been calm all night through everything, through the mockery, through the cold, through the shooting. And she said, with a flatness that somehow covered more ground than anything else she'd said all night, "You should have listened to me about the ridge." Cole held a look for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "We should have." Across the helicopter, Torres was looking out his own window. Beside him, Nguyen. Beside Nguyen, Kowalski. None of them were laughing. Nobody was laughing. The Black Hawk climbed into the storm, and the mountains fell away beneath them. And somewhere in the dark behind them, the valley that had almost swallowed Bravo Element whole went still and white and silent again. But the mission wasn't finished. What waited at the FOB? What waited in the debrief? In the after-action report? In the intelligence that had been sitting in a classified folder for 3 days flagged priority and read by exactly the wrong people, would make the firefight in the valley look like a rehearsal. The FOB smelled like diesel and burned coffee and the particular brand of institutional exhaustion that accumulated in forward operating bases the way sediment accumulated in rivers, slowly, invisibly, until one day you noticed it had changed the color of everything. Bagram's secondary compound, the annex where JSOC elements staged and debriefed, was a low concrete building with fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. It was 4:40 local time when Bravo Element came through the door, and the compound's night staff moved around them with the practiced deficiency of people who had seen bloody teams return at odd hours often enough that it no longer registered as remarkable. Holcroft went immediately to the medical bay. Webb went with him, reluctant, his shoulder packed and his arm in a sling, improvised from a rifle sling during the flight back. Cole watched them go and then turned and found Lieutenant Colonel Sandra Marsh waiting for him in the hallway. Marsh ran the JSOC liaison office out of Bagram. She was 52, thin, with close-cropped silver hair and the posture of someone who had spent 3 decades refusing to take up less space in rooms than she was entitled to. Cole knew her from 2 previous deployments. She was not the kind of person who waited in hallways at 5 in the morning unless something was wrong. "Commander Cole," she said, "walk with me." It wasn't a request. They walked. "The after-action is going to be complicated," Marsh said, moving at a pace that suggested she wanted the conversation over before they reached wherever they were going. The intelligence that flagged the Holcroft location, it came through a specific channel. That channel has now been compromised, which means the source has been compromised, which means someone with access to mission planning fed targeting information to the people waiting on that ridge. Cole stopped walking. Marsh stopped 2 steps later and turned to look at him. "You're saying someone burned us," Cole said. "I'm saying the timing of that ambush was not coincidental. 12 fighters on the northern ridgeline in prepared positions, a second element on the eastern slope with a crew-served weapon, and a third covering the exfil corridor. That's not an opportunistic response. That's a reception committee." She paused. "Someone knew your route, your timeline, your primary exfil corridor." Cole looked at the wall for a moment. The fluorescent light buzzed faintly above them. "Who knew the full package?" "That's what we're going to spend the next several days determining. In the meantime, there are people here who are going to want to ask your shooter some questions. Cole looked back at her. She's 15, saying, I'm aware. She just spent 6 hours in -15 temperatures providing long-range overwatch for a compromised extraction. Alone. She ran 800 meters through deep snow under fire to make the exfil window. She can talk to people tomorrow. Marsh's expression didn't change. The people who want to speak with her are not from my office, Commander. They arrived from Langley 2 hours ago. They had prior knowledge that Hollow Point was going to be assigned to your element. A beat. Which is itself interesting, given that I didn't know until the helicopter was already in the air. The fluorescent light buzzed. Cole said nothing. Where is she? Marsh asked. I don't know, Cole said, which was technically true. He'd last seen Maya in the kit room off the main corridor, and he hadn't checked since. She's not going anywhere tonight. Make sure of that, Marsh said. She turned and walked away. After 3 steps, she stopped without turning. For what it's worth, Commander, the mission report from Phoenix Actual's JTAC is already in. He counted 12 confirmed engagements from Hollow Point's position. 6 of those were at ranges exceeding 900 meters, in a crosswind, at night, in deteriorating weather. She paused. Make sure whoever talks to her understands they're dealing with someone who is demonstrably not a child. She kept walking. Cole stood in the hallway for a moment, alone under the buzzing light, and thought about a 15-year-old girl sitting in a kit room looking at her hands. He found her in the equipment bay, not the kit room. She'd found a corner behind a row of storage lockers and folded herself into it, with the rifle disassembled across her knees and a cleaning kit open beside her. The weapon was field stripped to its major components: bolt carrier, trigger assembly, barrel. And she was working the bore with a carbon brush in the methodical, automatic way of someone whose hands needed something to do while her mind worked through something else. She looked up when Cole came around the locker, but didn't stop working. He pulled a folding chair over and sat down. For a moment, neither of them said anything. The cleaning brush made soft strokes through the bore. Somewhere deeper in the compound, someone was running a generator. You know they're going to want to debrief you, Cole said. I figured. You should try to sleep first. She looked at the barrel, held it to the light, checked the bore. I'm not tired. Maya. I'm fine, Commander. I didn't ask. She stopped working, set the barrel down on the cleaning cloth with careful precision, and looked at him. 15 years old. That thought kept recurring to Cole, not as a judgment, but as a fact that refused to settle into the background where facts usually went. She had the controlled exterior that people built over things they didn't want visible, and Cole recognized it because he'd been building his own version of it for 20 years, and he knew what the maintenance costs looked like on a person. They had our route, Cole said, our timeline, our primary exfil. This came from inside the planning cycle. Something moved across her face. Not surprise. Recognition. As if this were information she'd been waiting for. I know. Cole watched her. You know. I suspected. The way they were positioned on the ridge, they weren't there for the building. They were there for the extraction. They wanted the team in the open with the package. She picked up the bolt carrier and turned it in her hands. If they wanted to kill everyone in the objective building, they could have done that before we arrived. They waited. You figured that out when? On the approach. When I counted the heat signatures on the northern ridge and couldn't reconcile it with a local defensive posture. Those fighters didn't come from the valley. They came from somewhere else, and they came prepared. Someone gave them a window. Cole leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Why didn't you say that on the radio? She looked at him steadily. I said there were 12 heat signatures on the northern ridge, and they weren't trying to hide anymore. I gave you the information. What would you have done if I'd said, I think this is a deliberate compromise from inside your planning chain? Cole held the look for a moment. You'd have told me to stick to my lane, she said. Not unkind, just accurate. He didn't disagree. Where are you from? He asked. Not the answer on whatever paperwork they sent me. Actually. She reassembled the bolt carrier into the receiver with practiced, quiet efficiency. Montana. Originally. And the training? She didn't answer immediately. The rifle went back together the way it had come apart, component by component. each one seating correctly, no forcing, no hesitation. It was the assembly of someone who could do this blind in the cold and probably had. My father was a precision shooter, she said finally, before he was other things. Other things? He worked for people who didn't put their name on the door. She set the assembled rifle aside and began breaking down the cleaning kit. He died when I was 12. He'd been teaching me since I was 8. A pause. He believed you should teach people things that would keep them alive. He wasn't sentimental about it. What happened to him? Officially? Helicopter accident in a country that wasn't supposed to have American helicopters in it. She closed the cleaning kit with a snap. I don't know exactly what unofficially was. I've been trying to find out. Cole sat back. The generator hummed. He thought about classified mission jackets and agency personnel and the fact that a 15-year-old precision shooter had been assigned to his element through a channel that bypassed normal liaison procedures. Who sent you here? He said. A man named Carver. He works for an agency that doesn't advertise. She met Cole's eyes. He told me the Holcroft rescue was going to go wrong, and he wanted eyes on it. Good eyes. He sent you to watch. He sent me to help. There's a difference. A beat. There's also possibly no difference, depending on what he actually wanted. Cole stared at her. You're suspicious of the man who deployed you. I'm suspicious of most people, she said. It's kept me functional so far. A sound from the corridor. Boots on concrete, more than one person. Cole stood. The boots went past without stopping. He waited until the sound faded. There are 2 people from Langley here, he said. They want to talk to you. I'm going to try to be in that room. You don't have to be. I know. She looked at him for a moment with an expression he couldn't fully read. Not gratitude, not exactly. Something more complicated and less comfortable. Commander, the man on the roof of the East building. When I took that shot, the one at 8:50, the wind shifted at the last second. I had to compensate mid-breath. She paused. I didn't tell you that on the radio. Why are you telling me now? Because it wasn't perfect, she said. And I need you to know it wasn't perfect. I made it work, but it wasn't clean. And if the wind had held, I would have been faster and the machine gun would have been down 30 seconds sooner. Her jaw was set, not defensive, matter of fact. Your man Webb took that round during those 30 seconds. Cole was quiet for a moment. The rifle lay assembled and clean across the folding table. The light from the overhead fixture was the same brutal fluorescent as the hallway. Webb's going to be fine, Cole said. I know, but it's on my record. In here. She touched her temple briefly. My father kept a record like that. He said the day you stop keeping it is the day you start making worse mistakes. Cole looked at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his own chair, folded it, and set it against the locker. Get some sleep. An hour at least. I'll push the debrief. He was at the end of the row of lockers when she said, Commander. He stopped. Be careful with whoever Carver sent, she said. They're not here because of me. The 2 men from Langley were named Sellers and Brandt, and they had the careful, surface-level affability of people who had spent considerable professional energy learning to seem less dangerous than they were. Sellers was mid-40s, sandy-haired, wore a fleece over a button-down, and carried a tablet like a man who wanted you to think he was primarily administrative. Brandt was younger by 10 years, quiet, stood slightly to the left, and behind Sellers in a way that was almost certainly habitual and almost certainly professional. Cole pegged him as the analyst and Brandt as something else, the something else being the part Sellers wasn't advertising. Marsh sat at the head of the debrief table. Cole sat to her left. The 2 men from Langley sat across from him, and the recording equipment in the corner of the room ran silently. Maya Voss came in at 6:15, which meant she had slept for approximately an hour and 15 minutes and had managed to clean her face and change into a spare base layer from somewhere. She sat down across from Sellers without waiting to be directed and looked at him the way she'd looked at everything else all night. Not with hostility, not with openness, but with a flat, measuring attention that seemed to count what it saw. Sellers smiled. Maya, first, on behalf of the agency and the United States government, Thank you for your service tonight. What you accomplished. You have questions, Maya said. Ask them. Sellers paused. The smile didn't leave, but it rearranged itself into something slightly less automatic. All right, let's start with your relationship to Asset Carver. How long have you been working with him? 14 months? And the nature of that relationship. How would you characterize it? He gives me assignments. I execute them. We debrief afterward. Has he explained to you why he selects you specifically for these assignments? Maya looked at the table for a beat. He says my father trusted him and that I'm the best option available for what he needs. What does he need? Someone who can shoot at distance without drawing attention. Someone without institutional affiliation who can be put in places that documented assets can't go. She paused. Someone expendable enough that if things go wrong, there's no career damage. Brant, who had said nothing, shifted slightly in his chair. Cole noticed. So, he thought, did Maya, because her eyes moved to Brant for a fraction of a second before returning to Sellers. Do you know what Carver's current operational focus is? Sellers asked. I know what he's told me. I don't know how much of that is accurate. What has he told you? She was quiet for a moment, not reluctant, organizing. Cole had noticed she did this, gathered information into an order before she released it, the same way she gathered breath before a shot. He told me there's a network that's been routing intelligence out of JSOC planning cycles for approximately 2 years, not to a foreign government directly, to an intermediary organization. He said the Holcroft operation was one of several missions that had been compromised through this network, and that he wanted an independent observer present tonight because the official debrief wasn't going to capture what actually happened. The room was quiet. Marsh was looking at the table with an expression Cole recognized from operational briefings when someone said something that rearranged a significant amount of existing information. Sellers was looking at Maya with the tablet face down, untouched. Brant was looking at a point on the wall approximately 6 inches to the left of nobody. Carver told you this, Sellers said. Yes. When? 48 hours before this deployment. Sellers leaned back slightly. Something in his posture changed. Not dramatically, not in a way most people would catch, but Cole caught it and thought, there it is. He looked at Marsh. Marsh was still looking at the table. Maya, Sellers said, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer directly. When Carver briefed you on this deployment, did he give you any secondary instructions, beyond providing overwatch for Bravo Element? The question landed in the room and sat there. Maya looked at Sellers for a long moment, long enough that Cole felt the thing in the air between them tighten. He told me to observe and report, she said. I observed. I'm reporting. That's all? That's what I said. Sellers nodded slowly. Has Carver ever discussed your father's work with you, specifically what your father was doing in the year before his death? Cole watched Maya's face. The only change was in her jaw. A slight tightening, there and gone. Everything else stayed level. He's mentioned it, she said. Generally. Do you know what program your father was assigned to in his last deployment? He was assigned to a logistics support role in a country he couldn't name. Did Carver tell you the name of the program? A pause. No. Sellers opened his tablet, turned it around and slid it across the table toward her. Cole couldn't see the screen from his angle. He watched Maya's face instead. She looked at whatever was on the screen. Her expression did not change in any dramatic way. But her breathing changed, almost nothing, a single controlled adjustment, the kind of adjustment a person made when they had trained themselves not to react, and the thing in front of them was making that training work hard. Does the name Meridian mean anything to you? Sellers asked. Maya looked up from the tablet. She looked at Sellers. Then, very briefly, at Cole. Then back at Sellers. No, she said. She was lying. Cole didn't know how he knew, but he knew the way you knew weather was changing before the barometer moved. Something in the calibration of the surrounding air. Sellers retrieved the tablet. All right, we're going to pause here. I'd like to give you time to eat something and rest before we continue. We'll reconvene at... I'd like to be done, Maya said. We have more questions. I've answered the ones I can answer. She placed her hands flat on the table. 15 years old, in a concrete debrief room at 6:30 in the morning, and she held the table with the composure of someone who had been in difficult rooms before. If you have specific evidence that requires me to answer additional questions under a different protocol, I'll ask for that to be put in writing and I'll respond accordingly. Otherwise, I'm done. Sellers looked at her for a moment that stretched past comfortable. Then he looked at Marsh. Marsh looked at Cole. Cole said nothing. He was looking at Maya, and specifically at the hands she'd placed flat on the table, and the fact that they were not quite completely still. A small tremor, left index finger. Not fear, not exhaustion, something that lived deeper in a person than either of those. Sellers closed his tablet. "We'll be in touch," he said. Duh. The compound's small cafeteria served eggs and rehydrated potatoes and coffee that tasted like it had been brewed during a previous administration. Cole took a tray and sat at a corner table and was halfway through the coffee when Maya sat down across from him with nothing on her tray but a cup of the same coffee. "You're not eating," Cole said. "Neither are you." He pushed the eggs toward her. She ignored them. "Meridian," Cole said quietly. She wrapped both hands around the coffee cup and looked into it. The cafeteria had two other occupants, a comms technician at the far end and one of Torres's team eating alone with headphones on. Nobody within earshot. "My father mentioned it once," Maya said. 3 weeks before he died. We were at the range, at home. He was watching me shoot and we were talking about nothing. Normal things. And then he stopped and he said, 'If anyone ever asks you about Meridian, you tell them your father never mentioned it.'" Cole was quiet. "I was 12, she said. I didn't know what it meant. I asked him, and he looked at me the way he looked at targets, like he was calculating distance and wind and the odds of things going wrong. And then he said, 'It means there are people who do bad things inside good organizations and call it necessary, and sometimes knowing the name of the thing is the most dangerous thing a person can have.'" She paused. 3 weeks later, he was dead. "And Carver?" "Carver knew my father. He reached out 8 months after the funeral. He told my mother he was helping with the benefits claim, that my father's death needed proper documentation." She set the coffee down. "He was actually building a file on whatever Meridian was. He needed someone my father had trained, someone small enough to deploy in places documents couldn't reach." She looked up. "He's been using me to collect pieces of something. I don't know the whole shape of it yet." "But you're trying to find out." She didn't answer, which was an answer. Cole rubbed his face. The exhaustion was arriving now in a delayed wave, the way it always did after an operation. Held back by adrenaline and necessity, then returning with interest once the body decided the emergency was over. He was 41 years old, and he had been awake for 22 hours, and across the table a 15-year-old girl was describing a relationship with a covert agency operator in which she was simultaneously an asset and an investigator, and the thread connecting all of it was a dead man she'd never stopped grieving. "What happens if you find out what Meridian is?" Cole asked. Maya picked up the coffee again. "Then I find out what happened to my father." "And if it's something you can't fix?" She looked at him over the rim of the cup. "I can shoot to 1,400 meters, she said quietly. "My father taught me that a sniper solves impossible problems, one way or the other." Cole held the look for a moment. He thought about Sellers and the tablet he hadn't shown Cole. He thought about Marsh's face in the debrief room. He thought about 12 fighters on a northern ridgeline in positions that required prior knowledge to prepare and a mission that had been burned before the helicopter left the ground. "Someone in my chain compromised last night's operation," he said. "Yes. If Meridian is what your father was warning about, a network inside JSOC or the agency, then last night wasn't the first time," she said. "And it won't be the last." A silence settled over the corner table. The comms technician got up and left, tray clattering. The fluorescent lights buzzed. Outside, the first gray light of an Afghan morning was pressing through the compound's narrow windows, thin and cold and completely indifferent to everything that had happened in the dark. Cole drank his coffee. Maya drank hers. Neither of them said what both of them were thinking. That Sellers had asked about Meridian, which meant the people from Langley already knew the name, which meant the question hadn't been information gathering. It had been a test. And the only thing more dangerous than what Maya might know was the fact that someone in that building now knew she knew something. The generator outside kicked on with a shudder that rattled the windows, and Cole looked up involuntarily, and when he looked back down, Maya was looking at the door. Not with fear, with the flat, measuring attention of a shooter assessing a position. Continue. She'd clocked the door's sightlines before she sat down. Cole realized this now. She'd chosen the seat with her back to the wall and the entrance in her peripheral vision, not because anyone had told her to, but because it was the only seat that made sense to her. His own instinct had taken him to the same corner for the same reason, and he'd sat down without thinking about it. That was the thing about people trained young. The habits didn't feel like habits anymore. They felt like gravity. The man named Brandt, Maya said, still looking at the door. He's not an analyst. No, Cole agreed. He was watching my hands during the debrief. I saw that. She turned her coffee cup slowly on the table. My father used to say that the most dangerous person in any meeting was the one who wasn't talking. She paused. He said the talker was showing you what they wanted you to see. The quiet one was seeing what you were trying to hide. Cole looked at his coffee. What were you trying to hide? The fact that Carver told me Meridian had an active component inside Bagram. She said it to the table very quietly. He didn't tell me who. He said he didn't know yet. But he said if last night went the way he thought it would go, someone here would try to ask me about it. Cole put his cup down. He was testing them, he said. Not you. He was testing them, she confirmed. Through me. Which makes you the piece he moved onto the board to watch where the other pieces reacted. She looked at him now, and there was something in her face that was younger than everything else about her. Not childlike exactly, but raw, uninsulated. The expression of someone who had understood something clearly and didn't particularly like the clarity. He knew they'd be here, she said. He knew they'd come to debrief me. He wanted to know which questions they'd ask. A pause. He told me, if they mention the name, they already know. If they know and they're asking you, they're not investigating it. They're managing it. The cafeteria was empty now. Just the two of them and the buzzing lights and the generator outside. Cole thought about Sellers' face when Maya said Carver had briefed her on the compromised intelligence network. Sellers hadn't been surprised. He'd been calibrating, measuring what she'd been told against what he'd wanted her to know. He thought about Marsh, who had been the only person in that room who'd looked genuinely unsettled. I need to make a call, Cole said. To who? Someone outside this building. He stood up. Don't go anywhere. Don't talk to Sellers or Brandt without me in the room. She looked up at him. And if they come while you're making your call? Cole picked up his coffee tray. Then remember what your father taught you. He walked out of the cafeteria and down the corridor toward the secure comm room, and behind him, in the corner with her back to the wall, Maya Voss wrapped both hands around a cup of coffee that had gone cold and stared at the door with the particular stillness of someone who was not waiting passively, but measuring, calculating, and deciding exactly how much patience the situation required before patience became its own kind of mistake. Cole was gone 11 minutes. Maya knew because she counted, not obsessively, not anxiously, but the way her father had taught her to track time without a watch, using breath cycles and ambient sound patterns and the intervals between the generator's load fluctuations outside. 11 minutes was long enough for a secure call to connect and deliver something significant. Long enough for the shape of whatever came next to have already been decided by people in rooms she'd never see. She was still at the corner table when he came back. She could read something in the set of his shoulders before he sat down. Not panic, not the controlled urgency of a man managing bad news, but the particular compression of someone who had just been handed a problem that didn't fit any existing category. He sat, didn't speak immediately. How bad? She asked. Carver's gone dark, Cole said. My contact at JSOC tried to reach him through the back channel he'd been using for the past 8 months. Nothing. His last transmission was 18 hours ago, 2 hours before we inserted. Maya set her coffee cup down with a care that was its own kind of stillness. He went dark before the mission went wrong, she said. Yes. Which means either he knew it was going to go wrong and pulled back to protect himself, Or someone got to him first, Cole finished, and the timing isn't coincidental. She looked at the table. Her hands were flat on the surface again, not trembling now. Something in her had locked down during the 11 minutes she'd been alone, and what came back to the table with Cole was someone who had finished deciding something. What did your contact say about the Meridian file? Cole looked at her steadily. He said it doesn't exist in any system he has access to. Not as a program designation, not as a project code, not as an operative alias. He paused. He also said that 3 months ago, a query for that term was run from inside this compound's intelligence terminal. The query returned no results, which is standard for something that's been scrubbed, but the query itself was logged. Who ran it? The terminal was logged to a signals analyst named Petrov, but Petrov has been on medical leave for 5 months. He let that sit for a moment. Someone used his access. Maya absorbed this in the way she absorbed ballistic data, not emotionally, but integrating it into an existing calculation, adjusting for what it changed. Petrov's access. A scrubbed program name. Sellers asking about Meridian in a room with recording equipment running. They're not investigating, she said. They're cleaning. That's my read. Then we don't have much time here. She looked at him directly. Where's the mission debrief documentation, the after action from last night? Being compiled by Marsh's office. Does Marsh know about Petrov's terminal? Not yet. Tell her, before Sellers does. She stood, picking up her coffee cup even though it was empty, the habit of keeping hands occupied. If Marsh is clean, she needs to know the file is being managed from inside her own compound. If she's not, then at least we know. Cole stood as well. He was a head taller than her and outweighed her by probably 80 pounds, and had 2 decades of operational experience and a chest full of qualifications, and he was taking tactical direction from a teenager in a spare base layer shirt, and somewhere in the back of his mind there was a version of him that found this absurd, but that version was getting quieter by the hour. There's one more thing, he said. My contact pulled what he could on your father's last assignment. It's not Meridian directly, but there's a logistics program, 3 years old, designated as support infrastructure for a series of forward positions in 3 countries. The program had an unusual funding structure, appropriations that didn't match the stated mission profile. The last audit was flagged by a contracting officer who subsequently resigned. He looked at her. Your father's name appears in the program's personnel manifest for the last rotation before his death. The cafeteria was empty and silent, and the morning light through the narrow windows had gone from gray to a thin, flat white. Maya stood very still for a moment, not the stillness of shock, but the stillness of a person who has been carrying a weight for 3 years and has just been handed a piece that changes the shape of it. What was the program name? She asked. Helix Support. She said nothing. Cole watched her face run through something internal that didn't fully surface. And then she nodded once, very slightly, the way a person nods when they've confirmed something they already half knew and didn't want to be right about. Carver mentioned that name, she said. Once. He said Helix was where it started. They found Marsh in her office at 7:45, and Cole put the Petrov terminal information on her desk without preamble, and Marsh read it twice and then set the paper down and looked at the window for long enough that Cole stopped counting seconds. Sellers knows about this, she said. It wasn't a question. He knows about Meridian, Cole said. Whether he knows about Petrov's terminal specifically, I don't know. Marsh looked at Maya, who was standing just inside the door with the same flat, evaluative expression she'd worn all night. You're the asset Carver deployed. Yes, ma'am. He briefed you that this compound had a compromised element. He said Meridian had an active component here. He didn't name anyone. Marsh looked at the paper again. She was the most controlled person in the room, which was saying something given the competition, but Cole could see the calculation running behind her eyes. An experienced officer mapping implications and exposure and the particular career-ending geometry of being the senior officer in a compound where classified terminal access had been used by a ghost. I'm going to make calls, Marsh said. Official channel, not through the Langley liaison. There are people at DIA who need to know the shape of this. She looked at Cole. Until I've made those calls, your team stays on compound. Nobody talks to Sellers or Brandt without my office present. She looked at Maya. That includes you. Understood, Maya said. Where are you sleeping? I haven't been. Marsh studied her for a moment. Something crossed her face that wasn't quite sympathy and wasn't quite professional assessment, somewhere between the two. There's a bunk in the female staff quarters. Second corridor. Tell the duty sergeant I sent you. Maya nodded. She was almost through the door when Marsh said, Miss Voss? Maya stopped. The after-action numbers from last night. Phoenix Actual's JTAC logged 12 confirmed engagements from your position. Range on 4 of those was over 900 meters in a crosswind at night. Marsh paused. I've been running liaison between JSOC and intelligence assets for 11 years. I've seen a lot of after-action reports. Another pause, smaller. I've never seen numbers like that from a single shooter in those conditions. Maya held the door. My father taught me. What was his name? Something shifted very slightly in Maya's face. Daniel Voss. He worked for an agency that doesn't advertise. Marsh went still in the way people went still when a name landed somewhere it had been before. Get some sleep, she said quietly. I'll know more in 2 hours. She didn't sleep. She lay on the bunk in the female staff quarters with her eyes at the ceiling and her rifle on the floor beside her, and her father's green logbook open on her chest, not reading it. She'd memorized it years ago, but holding it the way some people held photographs. Daniel Voss had kept records in that logbook for 4 years. Range sessions, environmental data, wind calculations, equipment notes. But he'd also kept other records in the same book. Observations, dates, names, and occasionally a single line that stood alone on its own page with no context. The kind of notes a man kept when he needed a record to exist but couldn't risk it being readable to anyone else. Maya had been working through the coding for 2 years. She'd solved most of it. The name Helix appeared in the logbook 4 times. The last entry was dated 19 days before his death. It said, H confirms the routing. Third country, no flag. They know I've seen the ledger, leaving M with R in case. M was Maya. She'd understood that immediately. R was a name she'd only recently connected to a person, Robert Carver, who had appeared at their front door in Great Falls 8 months after the funeral with a casserole and a benefits form, and had said, quietly to her mother, that he'd known Daniel and wanted to help. He'd been leaving something with Carver in case he didn't come back. She stared at the ceiling and thought about Carver going dark 18 hours before the mission went wrong, and thought about Sellers' face when she'd said the name Meridian, and thought about Brandt standing slightly behind and to the left watching her hands, and thought about the fact that Marsh had gone still at her father's name in a way that meant recognition. Everyone in this building knew more than they'd said, including her. Mant. The alarm wasn't an alarm. It was the sound of boots at double time in the corridor outside. Multiple pairs, moving with the focused urgency that wasn't a drill. Maya was off the bunk and had the rifle in her hands before the footsteps passed her door, which told her something about the state of her nervous system that she filed away for later. She opened the door. A compound security specialist she didn't know was moving past at a jog. She caught his arm. What's happening? He pulled his arm free without breaking stride. Perimeter breach. North fence. Stay inside. North fence. She went inside, pulled on her boots, grabbed her kit, and was out the door in 45 seconds. The compound's north fence was 200 meters from the staff quarters, a 12-foot chain-link barrier with concertina wire and motion sensors that covered the approach from the access road. By the time Maya reached the edge of the inner compound, she could hear radio traffic from the security post and see 2 of Marsh's staff moving in a crouch toward the vehicle bay. Cole materialized beside her from a different direction. He had his sidearm drawn. Report, she said. 2 individuals cut the north fence at 8:22. Security response team is moving to intercept. Compound lockdown is active. He looked at her. It might be nothing. Locals. Opportunists. It's not locals, she said. You don't know that. The north fence, she said. Not the road entrance, not the vehicle gate. The fence section that's farthest from the guard post and closest to the back of the intelligence block. She looked at him. Someone told them the layout. Cole was quiet for 3 seconds. Then he keyed his radio. "This is Commander Cole. I need eyes on the intelligence block, interior. Right now." The response was immediate, from someone in the security net. "Commander, this is Sergeant Adler. We've got 2 tangos in the wire on the north approach. Security team is... Stand by. We've got a 3rd contact, interior. Repeat, interior contact. Someone's inside the intel block." Cole looked at Maya. She was already moving. The intelligence block was a hardened room in the center of the main building. Reinforced walls, a cipher lock entry, and a server rack that contained, among other things, the mission documentation files for every operation staged out of this compound in the past 18 months. It also contained, as of this morning, Marcia's preliminary notes on the Petrov terminal query and the after-action documentation from last night. The cipher lock had been bypassed. The door stood 3 inches open. Cole went in first, weapon up, and Maya came in behind him in a low offset position that put her on the opposite side of the room from his entry angle. They moved like people who had trained together for years, which they hadn't, which meant they were both just doing what the geometry required. The room was dim. Server rack lights blinking green. One workstation active, screen bright. A man was at the workstation. Not Sellers, not Brandt. Someone she hadn't seen before. Compact, middle-aged, moving with the focused urgency of someone on a clock. He had a drive plugged into the workstation and was watching a progress bar on the screen. He heard them and turned. Cole said, "Don't." The man's hand was moving toward his jacket. "Don't," Cole said again, harder. The man stopped. His eyes moved from Cole to Maya and stayed there. Not with surprise, but with a particular recognition that told Maya he'd known she was in this compound. "Step away from the workstation," Cole said. The man stepped away. The progress bar on the screen was at 73%. Cole moved to the workstation, keeping his weapon up, and Maya moved around the opposite side to cover the door. "Who sent you?" Cole said. The man said nothing. He was looking at Maya with the focused, assessing attention of someone who had been briefed on a subject and was now comparing the briefing to the reality. "You're smaller than I expected," he said, to Maya. Conversational, almost. "Carver's file had you at 5'4". "I'm 5'2", Maya said. "Who has Carver's file?" He smiled. "It didn't reach much." "The same people who had your father's file. 3 years ago and now." The room went very quiet. The server rack hummed. The progress bar moved to 79. "Pull the drive," Maya said to Cole. Quietly. Cole reached over and pulled it. The progress bar stopped at 79% and the workstation chimed a failed transfer tone. The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "What's on that drive?" Cole said. The man looked at him now. "Nothing that concerns you, Commander." "You're in a classified intelligence block on a JSOC compound. Everything concerns me." "Your concern ends at your operational lane." He turned back to Maya. "Yours doesn't, though. Does it?" Not a question, a statement that contained too much knowledge of something to be bluster. "What do you know about my father?" Maya said. "Enough to know that what he found before he died was never meant to be findable, and enough to know that you've been moving toward it for 2 years with a very patient man holding your leash." He tilted his head slightly. "You should ask Carver sometime about the benefits paperwork he filed for your mother. Ask him who actually paid for that. Ask him what he got in exchange." The sound of boots in the corridor. Security team arriving late. Cole called out his identifier to prevent a collision, and 3 compound security personnel came through the door with weapons up, and the situation immediately became administrative. In the middle of the controlled noise of the next 30 seconds, the security team securing the man, Cole talking to Sergeant Adler, radios crackling. Maya looked at the stopped progress bar on the workstation screen. 79%. She looked at the drive in Cole's hand. She looked at the door and the corridor and ran a fast calculation on what 79% of a classified mission archive transferred to an unknown destination in the 40 seconds before they'd entered the room actually represented. "Cole," she said. He turned. "The transfer didn't start when he plugged in the drive," she said. 79% in under 2 minutes is too fast for a full archive. He came in with a targeted file list. She looked at the man being restrained by Adler's team. He already knew what he was looking for. He's been in this system before. The man said nothing, but his eyes moved to her, and in them was the confirmation that came from someone who had given up trying to hide a thing and was now simply watching to see what she'd do with it. Adler said, "Commander, we're going to need to take him to—" "I know where you're taking him," Cole said. "I'm coming." He looked at Maya. She looked at the workstation. The failed transfer notification was still on the screen, and below it, in the workstation's activity log, was a list of files that had been queued for transfer. Cole hadn't noticed it. Adler hadn't noticed it. She had. She looked at the list for 3 seconds, memorized it, not as an effort, but the way some people memorized faces or song lyrics, automatically and completely. Then she stepped back from the workstation and let the security team move past her. The third file on the list was labeled Voss, Daniel, Helix Debrief, Original, Unredacted. Her father had been debriefed about Helix, and someone had kept the unredacted original in a server room in Bagram, which meant someone had known it might be needed, which meant someone had been holding it as leverage or insurance or both. She walked out of the intelligence block and into the corridor and stood against the wall for a moment with her eyes closed. Her father had been debriefed. He told someone what he'd seen, and then he'd died. And the debrief was still here, in a server room, and someone had just tried to copy it. Cole came out behind her. Adler and the team were moving the man toward the detention room. The two-person breach on the north fence had been a diversion. Standard entry and diversion, external noise, internal action, extraction under cover of response, professionally executed, not opportunists. "Are you all right?" Cole said. She opened her eyes. "His access to this system isn't recent," she said. "He's been in it before. That file list was pre-built. He didn't query the system tonight. He already knew the file names and locations." She looked at Cole. "Which means the first access was at some point in the past, probably around the same time someone used Petrov's credentials." Cole looked at her. "You're saying the same person who ran the Meridian query also built that transfer list?" "I'm saying they're connected. 3 months ago, someone checked whether Meridian had been scrubbed from the system, confirmed it had. Then they built a targeted list of the files that still had exposure. The files that could reconstruct what Meridian was even without the program name." She paused. "My father's debrief is one of those files. Why is it still here? If someone's been cleaning—" "Because you can't delete a classified debrief without triggering an audit flag. You can scrub a program name. You can pull funding records. But a formal debrief with a witness signature gets a deletion flag that goes to 3 separate oversight offices automatically." She looked at him. "So they left it. And they've been waiting for a chance to extract it quietly. Tonight was that chance." Cole was quiet for a moment. The corridor was empty now. Security team gone, compound settling back into its institutional hum. "The man in there," he said. He said, "Ask Carver about the benefits paperwork. Ask who paid for it." "I know. Does that mean what I think it means?" She looked at the wall for a moment, the white paint, the buzzing light. "It means Carver may not be only what he told me he was." She said it flatly, without inflection, and the flatness was the most honest thing about it. The sound of someone processing a betrayal that hadn't fully arrived yet. "It doesn't change what I know about my father. It changes what I know about who's been helping me find it. Or using you to find it." "Yes," she said. "Or that." Marsh called them into her office at 9:30, with the kind of energy that meant the calls she'd made had returned results she hadn't anticipated. She was standing behind her desk rather than sitting, which Cole had never seen her do, and the preliminary notes she'd been working from were face down on the desk in a way that looked deliberate. Sellers and Brandt were not present. "Where are they?" Cole asked. "I asked them to remain in the liaison suite until I'd completed some coordination," Marsh said, which was a precise enough way of saying she'd locked them in. "Sit down." They sat. Marsh put her hands flat on the desk and looked at both of them in turn. "The DIA contact I reached this morning cross-referenced the Petrov terminal query and found a second query, 11 months ago, run from a terminal in our Kabul station under similar circumstances. Legitimate user, unauthorized access. That query was for Helix support." She paused. The Kabul terminal query was run 6 days before a site assessment team operating under Helix Support's program umbrella was ambushed in the Panjshir Valley. 4 casualties. The ambush had prior intelligence support. The team's route had been shared with the attacking force. Cole looked at the desk. 4 people died, Marsh said, because someone pulled their route from a terminal in Kabul and gave it to the people waiting for them. She looked at Maya. Your father's last operational rotation was with that assessment team. The office was very quiet. He wasn't one of the 4 casualties, Marsh said quickly. He survived the Panjshir ambush, but he was the only member of that team who filed a subsequent incident report alleging that the ambush was the result of a deliberate information compromise. That report was reviewed, classified, and archived. She paused. The reviewing officer's signature on the classification order is Sellers. Nobody said anything for a moment. He buried my father's report, Maya said. He classified it at a level that made it inaccessible to the investigation that followed, Marsh said. Whether that constitutes deliberate suppression or legitimate security judgment it's suppression, Maya said. Not angry, exact. The voice of someone stating a ballistic fact. My father survived an ambush that killed 4 people, filed a report saying it wasn't an accident, and then died 3 months later in a helicopter crash in a country that wasn't supposed to have American helicopters. And the man who buried his report is currently in a suite 2 corridors from here. She looked at Marsh. And you want to tell me whether that constitutes deliberate suppression? Marsh held her gaze. She didn't look away. I want to tell you that what I can act on and what is true may not be the same thing yet. Then what can you act on? The man in the detention room, the drive, the unauthorized terminal access. She straightened. Sellers and Brandt are going to be detained pending a formal review. I've already initiated that through the DIA channel, which bypasses the Langley liaison chain entirely. She looked at Cole. Your team is clear. You're not part of this. She looked back at Maya. You're more complicated. How so? You're a minor. You were deployed here through an unofficial channel by an asset who has now gone dark under suspicious circumstances. Your presence on last night's mission was not formally authorized through any channel I can verify. Marsh put her hands in her pockets. The after-action documentation exists. The JTAC's report exists. 12 confirmed engagements, 0 SEAL fatalities, 1 hostage rescued, 1 enemy commander captured. She looked at Maya steadily. Those numbers are going to draw attention. The kind of attention that's going to make the next few weeks of your life very complicated, regardless of what I do. I can handle complicated, Maya said. You're 15. I'm aware. Marsh looked at her for a long moment. Cole watched Marsh's face run through something. Not soft, not sentimental, but the expression of a senior officer calculating the distance between what the situation required and what the rules permitted, and finding the gap uncomfortably wide. The debrief file, Marsh said finally. Your father's. I'm going to have it pulled and reviewed by an independent oversight office. It will take time. It may be difficult to read. She paused. I'll make sure you're notified when it's available. Maya nodded once. She stood, and Cole stood beside her, and they walked to the door together, and Maya had her hand on the frame when Marsh said, Miss Voss. She stopped, didn't turn all the way. 12 engagements, Marsh said quietly. 3 of those were moving targets, sub-second windows, ranges over 1,000 meters. In those conditions. A pause. I've been in this business a long time. I know what numbers like that mean. Maya turned just enough to see her. What do they mean? They mean you're not a variable someone gets to move around a board, Marsh said. Whatever Carver thought he was doing, you need to understand that. Maya looked at her for a moment. The morning light from the office window was thin and flat and fell across the floor between them. My father taught me, she said again, that a sniper solves impossible problems. She walked out. In the corridor, Cole fell in beside her without speaking. Their boots made the same sound on the concrete floor. Behind them, Marsh's office door stayed open, and through it, the distant compound noise filtered in. Generators, radio traffic, the particular low institutional frequency of a place where serious things happened and were carefully not discussed. They were 30 meters down the corridor when the compound's emergency alert system activated. Not the perimeter breach tone. The other one. The one that meant something had happened inside. Cole stopped. Maya stopped. Adler's voice came over the radio, clipped and stripped of everything except information. All personnel, detainee in holding is down. Repeat, detainee is down. Medical to detention block immediately. This is not a drill. Cole looked at Maya, the man they'd pulled out of the intelligence block, the man who'd known about Carver's file, who'd said, ask Carver about the benefits paperwork, who'd looked at Maya with the recognition of someone who'd been thoroughly briefed, was down. In a secured detention room, in a compound on lockdown. Cole keyed his radio. Adler. What does down mean? A pause that was 2 seconds too long. It means he's not breathing, Commander. Maya stood in the corridor and didn't move. Her face was the same controlled surface it had been all night, but her eyes were doing the thing they did when she was running calculations, moving slightly, tracking through implications, arriving at conclusions she wasn't sharing yet. He knew something, she said quietly, and someone in this building knew he knew it. Cole looked down the corridor toward the detention block, then back at her. He mentioned Carver, she said. He mentioned my father. He mentioned Meridian without being asked. She paused. He was going to talk. We don't know that. Somebody did, she said. Somebody in this building decided the risk was too high to wait for a formal interview. She looked at Cole directly. Which means Sellers and Brandt weren't the only problem. There's at least one more. The emergency alert was still running its low tone through the compound speakers. Down the corridor, boots were moving fast toward the detention block. The morning light through the narrow windows was the same thin, flat white it had been for the last hour, indifferent and clear. Cole stood in it and thought about a network inside good organizations, about a man who'd used a dead man's terminal credentials to search for a scrubbed name, about a father's unredacted debrief, sitting in a server room for 3 years like a bomb someone had decided was safer to leave in place than to dismantle. Maya Voss stood beside him, small, still, rifle slung, logbook in her jacket pocket, and looked at nothing in particular with the flat measuring attention of a shooter who had already identified the position and was waiting, with professional patience, for the right moment to act. She was 15 years old. She had just survived a compromised extraction, a 6-hour solo overwatch in conditions that would have broken most adults, a hostile intelligence debrief, and a compound intrusion, all in one night. And whoever had just killed the man in the detention block didn't know yet that the most dangerous thing they'd left loose in this compound wasn't a SEAL commander or a DIA investigation. It was a girl with a green logbook and her dead father's calculations memorized down to the last decimal. The detention block smelled like antiseptic, and something underneath it that antiseptic was designed to cover. Maya stood in the doorway and looked at the man on the floor. He was on his back, one arm extended, the other folded across his chest, in the particular arrangement that happened when a person went down fast, and the body's last reflexive movement settled it into something almost deliberate. His face was turned toward the wall. His color was wrong. Not the gray of natural death, but something with a bluish undertone that she recognized from a toxicology manual her father had kept on the shelf between a ballistics handbook and a worn field surgery guide. Adler was crouched beside the body, not touching, waiting for the medical staff who were 30 seconds behind them. Cole stood at Maya's left shoulder. The detention room was small, 4 meters by 4 meters, bare walls, a single ceiling fixture, a bolted bench along one wall, and a drain in the floor. No windows. One entrance. How long? Cole said to Adler. Guard checked on him at 8:55. He was responsive, asked for water. Guard came back at 9:18 with the water, found him like this. Adler stood up. He was a compact man, ex-infantry, competent in the way of people who had stayed in a difficult job long enough that their competence had become structural rather than effortful. He looked troubled in a way that suggested he was doing the math and not liking the answer. 23 minutes. Nobody came in or out. I've got the access log. Show me, Cole said. Adler pulled out a tablet with the door access record. One entry. Guard in at 8:55, out at 8:57. One entry. Guard in at 9:18. Nothing else. The ventilation, Maya said. Both men looked at her. She pointed at the ceiling vent. Standard HV. AC grate, approximately 30 centimeters by 20, high on the wall above the door. What does that connect to? Adler looked at it. Main building climate system, runs through the ceiling space above the corridor. Is there a shared return with any other room? Adler didn't answer immediately, which was an answer. Check the room adjacent, Maya said, and check the climate system access panel, which is probably in a utility corridor. Adler looked at Cole. Cole nodded once. Adler left. The medical staff arrived, 2 of them, and Cole moved out of their way and into the corridor, and Maya followed. The door closed behind them, and through it came the quiet professional sounds of people determining what they already knew. Cole said very quietly, "Aerosolized." "Probably," Maya said. "Small volume, targeted dispersal through a shared ventilation return. You'd need access to the utility corridor, 10 seconds, and something that acts fast at low concentration." She paused. "It's not improvised. It was brought in." "Brought in when?" "Before the north fence breach. The breach was the diversion for the intelligence block. The intelligence block was the diversion for this." Cole looked at the closed door. "They sacrificed the man in the intel block. He was always expendable. He was the entry point. Get caught, create noise, draw response away from the utility corridor." She looked at the wall. "He didn't know that's what he was." The corridor was quiet except for the distant compound sounds. Cole rubbed the back of his neck with one hand, the gesture of a man who had been awake too long running too many calculations and was starting to feel the weight of them compound. "Sellers and Brandt," he said, "are in the liaison suite under Marsh's instruction," Maya said, "which doesn't mean one of them isn't the problem. It means the problem is also somewhere else. There's a third person. At least." Cole keyed his radio. "Marsh, this is Cole. I need you at the detention block. Now." Marsh arrived in 4 minutes, which meant she'd been moving before the radio call, which meant she'd already been thinking about the same thing. She came down the corridor with her aide, a young captain named Devereaux, who was visibly out of his depth and trying not to show it, and she looked at the closed detention room door, and then at Cole, and then at Maya. "Tell me," she said. Cole told her, concise, sequenced, no editorializing. Marsh listened without interrupting, which was a thing Cole had always respected about her. She didn't perform listening, she just did it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The utility corridor access. Adler's checking it now. If there's physical evidence in the utility corridor, it needs to be secured before anyone else accesses it." She looked at Devereaux. "Get compound security to seal the entire HVA-C utility access from the east wing to the detention block. Nobody in or out until I authorize it personally." Devereaux left at a pace that was almost a run. Marsh looked at Maya. "You identified the dispersal method." "I identified a likely dispersal method," Maya said. "I don't have confirmation." "What made you look at the vent?" Maya paused. Not reluctance, selecting how much to explain. "My father's logbook. He documented a contact death in the Panjshir, one of the 4 casualties from the ambush. The incident report attributed it to a secondary explosive device, but his notes suggested the casualty's presentation was inconsistent with blast trauma. He wrote a single line. Not the device. Something prior. Check confined space ventilation." She paused. The report was classified before that detail could be followed up. Marsh absorbed this with the stillness of someone who had just had a 2-year-old question answered in a way that opened 4 new questions. He documented it as a possible chemical dispersal. He documented it as something that didn't match the official explanation. He didn't have access to the toxicology. Maya looked at the door. "Now we might." "What?" Adler came back at 10:15. He came back with photographs on his tablet and an expression that had moved past, troubled into something quieter and more fixed. He showed the photographs to Cole and Marsh without speaking first. The utility corridor, a small access panel in the HVAC return plenum, and on the interior surface of the panel, a strip of adhesive residue approximately 8 centimeters long and below it, a tiny pressure-activated dispersal nozzle still in place, the reservoir empty. It was already installed, Adler said. This isn't something that went in today. The adhesive pattern suggests it's been there for, I'm not qualified to say exactly, but the oxidation on the bracket suggests weeks. The corridor was very quiet. Weeks, Marsh said. Yes, ma'am. Before last night's operation. Yes, ma'am. Marsh looked at the photograph for a long moment. Someone prepared a contingency for a scenario in which a detainee needed to be silenced. In this detention room specifically, weeks ago. That's what it looks like, Adler said. Cole said, which means whoever placed it had access to this compound on a non-emergency basis, not a rushed insertion, a planned placement during routine access. Routine access, Marsh said. She said it the way a person said something that meant more than it appeared to. She looked at the tablet for another moment, then handed it back to Adler. I want a full access log for the utility corridor for the past 60 days. Every name, every timestamp. Sergeant, I also need the medical examiner to prioritize that toxicology. I want a preliminary result in 2 hours, not 2 days. Yes, ma'am. Adler left again. Marsh turned to look at the wall, hands in her pockets, and did the thing she'd been doing all morning, the visible running of implications through a system built for exactly this kind of calculation. Sellers and Brandt, she said to the wall. Marsh, Cole said. I know. She turned. I know, but I need to have that conversation, and I need it documented, and I need it done in a way that... She stopped, reorganized. This has gotten significantly larger than a compromised extraction. It was always larger than that, Maya said quietly. Marsh looked at her. Yes, I'm beginning to understand that. Get best. The formal interview with Sellers and Brandt happened at 11 o'clock in the main debrief room with Marsh at the head of the table, Cole to her right, and a DIA representative participating via encrypted video link from Kabul. A woman named Hartley, who had the flat professional affect of someone who had sat through too many of these to be surprised by them anymore. Maya was not in the room. She was in the corridor outside it, sitting on a bench with her back against the wall and the green logbook open across her knees, not reading it, but holding it open to the last entry. Her father's final notation, 19 days before his death. She could hear portions of the conversation through the door. Not all of it. Enough. Sellers' voice, measured and even. My office initiated the Meridian query as part of a routine audit of deprecated program designations. The Petrov credentials were used in error, a terminal assignment overlap during a staffing transition. There was no unauthorized access. Marsh. The query returned no results. A routine audit of a scrub designation has no operational purpose. Sellers. The audit was procedural. Marsh. Walk me through the procedure. A pause. Sellers. I prefer to have legal counsel present for Marsh. You're not under arrest, Mr. Sellers. This is an administrative interview. You're free to decline to answer. Another pause. Longer. Brandt, speaking for the first time in the interview, quietly. We'd like to reschedule. Marsh. That request is noted. The sound of chairs. Maya closed the logbook. The door opened and Sellers came out first, Brandt behind him, and they were 2 meters down the corridor before Sellers registered that Maya was sitting on the bench. He stopped. He looked at her for a moment. His face was the same careful affability it had been all morning, surface managed, professionally maintained, but something behind it had shifted, and what she could see of that shift was not anger or fear, but something more deliberate. Assessment. Recalculation. You've had a long night, he said. Yes, she said. You should think about going home. He said it neutrally, not a threat, not advice, a statement that contained a weight she was supposed to feel without him having to specify what the weight was. She looked at him. My father thought about going home too, she said. He had a return ticket. It's in his file. Sellers held the look for 2 seconds. Then he and Brandt walked down the corridor and around the corner, and they were gone. Maya sat with the logbook on her knees and watched the space where they'd been. Cole came out of the debrief room at 11:40 and sat on the bench beside her. Sellers is requesting legal counsel and a transfer to the Cobble station, he said. Brandt isn't saying anything at all, which is either very smart or an indication that he has very good training. Both, Maya said. Hartley from DIA is pulling the 60-day utility corridor access log remotely. She's comparing it against badged entry records. He leaned back against the wall. This is going to take time. Weeks, probably. Maybe months before anything formal moves. I know. And you're 15. He said it not unkindly, but directly. Whatever this becomes, the investigation, the oversight review, the legal process, you're going to be a central witness in a classified proceeding for which you have no official status, no institutional affiliation, and no legal representation. I know that too. Is there someone I can call? Your mother. My mother doesn't know what I've been doing for the past 14 months, Maya said. She thinks I've been at an advanced academic program in Virginia. A pause. Which I have been, between deployments. Cole looked at her sideways. Between deployments. Carver had a cover structure. It was functional. She turned the logbook over in her hands. She knows I shoot competitively. She thinks that's what I've been doing. Cole was quiet for a moment. Your mother lost her husband. She thinks she still has her daughter. Maya didn't answer immediately. The corridor was empty, the compound settling back toward its operational baseline despite everything, because forward operating environments had a way of absorbing extraordinary events and continuing to function because they had to, because the alternative was worse. I know, she said finally, quietly, in a way that covered more ground than the two words suggested. Cole looked at the wall across from them. What's in the logbook? She considered for a moment, then handed it to him. He took it carefully, aware of what it was, and looked at the open page. The handwriting was tight and angular, a trained hand, deliberate spacing, the kind of writing that developed when a person was used to recording precise things in small notebooks in difficult conditions. He read the last entry. H confirms the routing. Third country, no flag. They know I've seen the ledger, leaving M with R in case. He read it again, looked up. 8, he said. I thought it was Helix for a long time, Maya said. The program. But Helix was the cover. A program doesn't confirm routing. A person does. H is a person. I think so. Someone senior enough to have confirmed the financial routing for whatever Meridian's operational funding looked like. Someone my father trusted enough to report to. She took the logbook back, and someone who apparently decided that my father had seen too much. Cole looked at the corridor's far end. Seller's first name is Andrew. I know. Brandt is Thomas. I know that too. H, Cole said. Maya turned to the front of the logbook. Near the beginning, before the range data and the wind calculations and the shot logs, there was a page that was mostly blank. A single entry in the upper left corner, initials only, written in a different pen from everything else. Older ink, faded slightly. Contact, VH. She showed it to Cole. VH, he said. My father's handler, before Carver. The person who recruited him into the program that became Helix, and before that, whatever Meridian was. She closed the logbook. I've had a name for 8 months. 2 initials. I haven't been able to put a full name to them. But Carver knew. Carver knows a lot of things he's calibrated very carefully about when to tell me. The flatness in her voice was back, not cold, not angry, but the sound of someone holding something at arm's length while they decided what to do with it. He gave me enough to keep moving, not enough to get there without him. Cole thought about that for a moment. The mechanics of how a person used another person's grief as a navigational tool, feeding it information in measured doses to maintain direction and dependency. When he surfaces, Cole said, you need to be careful. I've been careful, she said. That's different from being safe. Though Marsh called them back to her office at 1300, and the shape of her face when they came through the door told Cole the access log had returned something. She didn't make them sit. She turned her monitor around on the desk so they could both see it. The 60-day utility corridor access log was on screen, time-stamped entries, badged names. Marsh had highlighted one entry. 41 days ago, 14:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. A routine maintenance visit, logged under a facilities contractor designation. The badge number didn't match any contractor in the current approved vendor list. The discrepancy had been flagged automatically by the access system at the time and then cleared, manually, 6 hours later by a user with administrative override authority. The administrative override was logged to an account designation. Senior Liaison Officer, Bagram Annex. Marsh looked at them both. Her expression was the particular compression of a senior officer who had arrived at a conclusion she'd been hoping not to reach. Sellers has been the senior liaison officer here for 8 months, Cole said. Yes, Marsh said. He cleared a flagged access entry for a non-existent contractor. Yes, 41 days ago. Which is, Marsh said, approximately the time that a toxicology specialist with the DIA's Technical Services Division was scheduled to visit this compound for a routine equipment review. That visit was canceled at the last minute due to a scheduling conflict. She paused. The scheduling conflict was logged by Sellers' office. The office was very quiet. He canceled the inspection that would have found the dispersal device, Cole said. That's one interpretation. Marsh. I know, Ethan. She sat down, carefully, like a person who needed a moment to redistribute weight. I know what it means. I need it to be documented correctly before I can act on it in a way that holds. She looked at Maya. There's something else. She pulled a second document on the screen, a personnel record, partially redacted. The DIA ran VH against the personnel database covering the relevant operational period based on the program designations we've identified. It's not complete. A lot of this is still redacted. But there's one match for a senior handler designation active during both the Meridian period and the early Helix program. Maya leaned forward. The name under the partial record was redacted, but the contact designation field showed VH, Hartley, Victor, Senior Case Officer, retired, Hartley. Cole said it first. The DIA representative on our video link this morning. Victor Hartley, Marsh said, retired from active casework 4 years ago. Currently holds a senior advisory role with the DIA's Oversight Division. She looked at Maya. He was on the video link when we discussed the Petrov terminal query, when I mentioned your name. A pause. When I mentioned your father's name. Maya stood very still. Victor Hartley had been on the call. He'd heard everything. He'd heard Marsh mention Daniel Voss's unredacted debrief sitting in the server room. He'd heard the discussion about the compromised terminal access. He'd had 90 minutes between that call and the moment the man in the detention block stopped breathing. He's not in Kabul, Maya said. Marsh looked at her. You said he was participating via link from Kabul station, but if he cleared the device 41 days ago, if he's been managing this from inside the system, he wouldn't be in Kabul. She looked at Marsh directly. Where is he actually? Marsh picked up her phone. She spoke to someone briefly, listened, and set the phone down. He arrived at Bagram main terminal at 6 a.m. this morning, she said. He logged in as an oversight visitor. He's been on compound for 4 hours. Cole was already moving for the door. Wait, Marsh said. Cole, wait. If we move on him wrong, if we don't have this documented correctly... Marsh, he's been on compound for 4 hours, Cole said. He was on your video call. He knows what we know. He knows where we are. And he has the access and the resources to... I need 5 minutes, Marsh said. To do this right. 5 minutes. Cole stopped at the door. Maya was looking at the partially redacted personnel record on Marsh's screen. Victor Hartley, Senior Case Officer. The VH from the front of her father's logbook. The person who had recruited Daniel Voss into a program that had gotten 4 people killed in a valley in Panjshir and then gotten her father killed 3 months later when he tried to file a report about it. She'd had initials for 8 months. She had a name for 40 seconds. She said, Marsh, the unredacted debrief. My father's. Can you pull it now? Marsh looked at her. Before anyone else tries to get to it, Maya said, pull it now, copy it to the DIA oversight channel that bypasses Hartley, and send it to Hartley's office in an official notification. Let him know it's been accessed and distributed. She paused. If he's here to manage the exposure, the fastest way to neutralize that objective is to make the exposure irreversible. Marsh held her gaze for a long moment. You want to detonate it before he can contain it. I want to make containment impossible, Maya said. Which is different. Marsh looked at Cole. Cole looked at the door, then back at Marsh. She's right, he said. Marsh turned to her computer. Her hands moved across the keyboard with the deliberate, committed speed of someone who had decided and was acting before the decision could be revisited. The file pulled up. Maya didn't look at the screen. Not yet. She stood with her back straight and her hands at her sides and her father's logbook in her jacket pocket and waited while Marsh copied the document to 3 separate oversight channels and generated an official access notification. Done, Marsh said. Now find Hartley, Cole said. Bush. They found him in the East Wing, not hiding, walking, moving through the corridor that ran along the back of the intelligence block with the unhurried pace of a man on a routine visit, a visitor badge clipped to his jacket, a leather document case in his left hand. He was late 60s, silver-haired, the kind of build that had once been substantial and had compressed over years into something still solid. He walked like a man accustomed to being the most senior person in any given room. Cole came from the north end of the corridor. Adler and 2 compound security personnel came from the south. Hartley stopped when he saw the arrangement. He looked at Cole, then at the security personnel, then at Maya, who had come in behind Cole. He looked at Maya for a long moment. You look like him, he said. He said it without apparent emotion, an observation made because it was accurate. I know, Maya said. He was one of the best I ever handled. He held the document case with both hands now, not reaching for anything, not moving. That's not a performance, it's true. And yet, Cole said. Hartley looked at Cole. And yet. He was quiet for a moment. The Panjshir ambush was not supposed to produce casualties. The intention was a controlled compromise. The team's route was shared to force a route change and abort the assessment. Someone downstream escalated without authorization. 4 people died, Cole said. 4 people died, Hartley agreed. That was not the authorized outcome. But my father survived, Maya said, and filed a report. And that was the problem. Hartley looked at her. He was going to bring the entire funding structure into daylight, not just Helix, the full chain going back to Meridian, 14 years of operational funding that ran through structures that could not withstand the kind of scrutiny he was preparing to provide. He paused. I tried to manage it. There were options short of what happened. Those options were not taken by the people managing the situation on the ground. Who managed the situation on the ground, Maya said, in that country that wasn't supposed to have American helicopters? He didn't answer. Sellers, Cole said. Hartley looked at the wall between them, which was, in itself, an answer. Sellers was the operational manager for Helix at the time, Hartley said carefully. His decisions in that period are... He stopped. That's a conversation for a different venue. The debrief, Maya said. My father's unredacted debrief. He named Sellers, didn't he? Hartley was quiet. That's why it was classified and kept here instead of archived properly. Because properly archiving it would have moved it through channels where the classification could be reviewed. Keeping it here kept it accessible to the people who needed it to stay buried. She stepped forward 1 step. But my father gave Carver a copy. Something shifted in Hartley's face. Small. Controlled. But there. A copy, he said. You didn't know about the copy. He was very still now. The document case was held in both hands, and he was very, very still. Carver has been holding it for 3 years, Maya said. That's why he went dark before last night. Not because he was compromised, but because he knew if last night went the way it was going to go, the pressure on this compound would force the debrief into the open. He positioned himself outside the blast radius. She paused. He's been waiting for this. And the copy exists. Hartley looked at her. And for the first time since they'd found him in the corridor, the professional composure developed across 4 decades of covert operations work showed a seam. Not a crack. A seam. The line where 2 pieces of carefully constructed surface met and didn't quite match. Your father trusted him too much, Hartley said, quietly. My father trusted the right people with the right things, Maya said. He just didn't live long enough to use them himself. Adler stepped forward from the south end of the corridor. "Mr. Hartley, I'm going to need you to come with us." Hartley looked at Cole, then at Maya. "You're 15 years old," he said, not contemptuous, something more complicated, a man confronting the specific geometry of his own situation. "Yes," she said, "your father would be—" He stopped, looked at the wall, didn't finish it. "I know what he would be," Maya said. Hartley nodded once, very slightly. He let Adler take him by the arm, and he walked with the compound security personnel without resistance, and as he passed Maya in the corridor, he slowed for just a moment. Adler led him. And he looked at her with the expression of a man who had run a very long operation and had finally arrived at its end in a way he hadn't planned for. And he said, "The copy. Make sure it goes to the right people." Maya looked at him. "Tell me who the right people are." "Not Langley," he said. "Not DIA oversight. There's a Senate subcommittee, Armed Services, Minority Council. A woman named Baxter. Your father knew her." He paused. "She's been waiting a long time for something she could use." Adler moved him on. Maya stood in the corridor and watched him go, and Cole stood beside her, and neither of them said anything for a long time. The corridor was quiet. The fluorescent light buzzed. Down at the far end, through the narrow window, the afternoon light had turned the Afghan plateau a flat, pale gold. The particular color of altitude in winter, when the sun came in low and honest and indifferent to everything beneath it. Maya put her hand in her jacket pocket and felt the logbook there. Small, familiar, the corners worn from 3 years of being carried in pockets and kit bags, and tucked under the mattresses of bunks in places her mother didn't know existed. She thought about a man standing at a range in Montana watching his 8-year-old daughter figure out wind compensation by herself because he hadn't told her how, just pointed at the target and waited. About the way he'd looked when she got it right, not proud exactly, but satisfied in the way a person was satisfied when a thing they'd built worked the way they'd built it to work. About the fact that he'd left her with the tools. She just hadn't understood yet that the tools weren't only the rifle. Cole found her on the compound's eastern perimeter wall an hour after Hartley was taken into custody. She was sitting on a low concrete barrier with her back to the interior, facing out toward the plateau, the rifle across her knees and the logbook closed beside her. The afternoon light had gone from pale gold to something deeper. The kind of late Afghan afternoon that made the mountains look like they'd been cut from the same material as the sky, just a different density of it. Cold had returned with the dropping sun, but she wasn't moving, just sitting. He climbed up beside her and sat down without asking if she wanted company, which was the correct choice, and for a few minutes neither of them said anything. The plateau stretched east toward the mountain wall, brown and gray and immense. The kind of landscape that made human activity feel temporary in a way that was either humbling or clarifying depending on the person. Cole had spent enough time in this country to have moved from the first to the second. He suspected Maya had arrived at the second without going through the first. "Carver called," she said. Cole looked at her. "When?" 20 minutes ago. Compound duty officer patched it through. He's in Vienna." She paused. "He said he heard Hartley was detained." That was fast. "He's been watching," she said. "That's what he does." She looked out at the plateau. "He told me the copy of my father's debrief is in a safety deposit box in a bank in Great Falls. He has the key. He said he'll hand it to whichever oversight structure I designate, or he'll hand it directly to the Senate subcommittee contact, the woman named Baxter." She paused again. "He said the choice is mine." Cole waited. "He also told me that he's sorry," she said, "that he used me. His word, used. He said he built the approach around what I needed to find rather than around my safety, and that he told himself those were the same thing when he knew they weren't." She turned the logbook over in her hands. "He said my father would have told him he was wrong." Was he? Wrong. She thought about that, actually thought, rather than answering reflexively. "He got me to the right place," she said. "Everything I've been trying to find for 3 years. I'm closer to it tonight than I've ever been, because of the path he laid out." She looked down at the logbook. "I just don't know if my father would have chosen this path for me." "Would you?" She was quiet for a long moment. The wind moved across the plateau and pushed her hair across her face, and she didn't reach up to fix it. "I don't know how to want a different one," she said. "This is the only path I've been on. It's hard to want something you can't see from where you're standing." Cole looked out at the mountains. "What did you tell Carver?" "I told him to send the key to Baxter directly," she said. "Skip the intermediary. Baxter's office gets the physical key and the location. Carver provides authentication. The debrief enters the oversight process without going through any channel that Sellers or Hartley have touched." She paused. "And then I told him we were done." "How did he take that?" "He said okay." A beat. "He said he expected it. He said my father always finished what he started, and he supposed I'd inherited that." She almost smiled. Not quite. The shape of almost a smile. "I told him that wasn't his to comment on." "Good," Cole said. She looked at him. The gray-green eyes in the late light. Older than anything else about her face, not because of the night, but because of the 3 years before it. "The team patch," she said. "Webb. What about it?" "He told you about it." It wasn't a question. She'd worked it out from somewhere. "Before the op, when we were still in the infill pattern and you were still deciding what to do with me." Cole was quiet for a moment. "He said he'd seen a lot of people get handed a rifle and called a shooter. He said maybe 1 in 50 actually understood what the rifle was for." He paused. "He said the rest just understood how to use it." She absorbed this. "He's going to be fine," Cole said. "The shoulder. Clean exit. No joint involvement. He's already arguing with the medical staff about range of motion restrictions." That did get something from her. A small sound that was close enough to a laugh that it counted. "That sounds right." They sat in the cold for another moment. Then Cole reached into his jacket and took out a patch. The Bravo Element patch, subdued, the kind of thing that didn't appear on any official uniform, but lived in pockets and on the inside of kit bags and occasionally got pressed into someone's palm at the end of something hard. He set it on the concrete barrier beside her. She looked at it without picking it up. "Webb's idea," Cole said. "I just agreed." She put her hand over it, flat, and left it there. "I'm going home," she said. "My mother doesn't know where I've been. She thinks—" She stopped, reorganized. "I need to figure out what I tell her." "Tell her the truth," Cole said. "As much of it as she can hold." "She'll be angry." "Yes." "She'll be scared." "Also, yes." "And then she'll want me to stop." Cole looked at her. "Will you?" Maya picked up the patch and turned it over in her fingers. The embroidered thread was slightly raised, the colors muted, something someone had made carefully to last. "I'm 15, she said. "I have to finish school. I have to take the SAT and write a college essay and figure out what I want to be." She closed her fingers around the patch. "My father would have wanted me to do all of that." "And the other thing?" "The other thing doesn't stop just because Hartley is in custody," she said. "Sellers hasn't been formally charged yet. The funding chain behind Meridian runs deeper than 2 men. The 4 people who died in the Panchir still have families who got an official explanation that's not true." She tucked the patch into her jacket pocket beside the logbook. "My father was thorough." Beside the shah. "He taught me to be thorough." A pause. "But he also taught me that rushing a shot ruins the shot. So you wait." "So I go home," she said. "I go to school. I finish what I started, and I wait until I can do the rest of it correctly." She stood, picking up the rifle and settling its weight across her shoulders with the automatic ease of someone for whom the weight had long since become familiar. There's a difference between stopping and choosing your timing. Cole stood beside her. He was quiet for a moment, looking out at the mountains that were turning from gold to purple in the failing light. "For what it's worth," he said, "from someone who spent 20 years doing this, the fact that you know that difference at 15 is not nothing." She looked at him. "You thought I was a mistake when you first saw me." "Yes." "And now?" He considered this with the seriousness it deserved, rather than offering something easy. "Now I think you're probably going to cause a significant amount of trouble for the right people," he said, "and I think your father knew exactly what he was building." She held the look for a moment. Then she nodded, once, the way she nodded when a calculation came out correctly. They climbed down from the perimeter wall together. The formal proceedings against Victor Hartley and Andrew Sellers began 6 weeks after Bagram. It was slow, as these things always were. Layers of classification review, interagency jurisdictional disputes, the particular institutional friction of powerful organizations reluctant to expose damage in their own structures. The Senate Subcommittee's Minority Counsel, a woman named Eleanor Baxter, who turned out to be exactly as formidable as Hartley had implied, received Carver's key and the safety deposit box contents and entered Daniel Voss's unredacted debrief into a closed-session evidentiary record that would not be publicly accessible for years. But it existed. It was in the record. And the people who had spent 3 years trying to ensure it never reached daylight now had to contend with the fact that it had. Sellers was placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The leave was quiet. No announcement, no official statement. The kind of administrative action that looked like nothing from the outside and meant everything from the inside. Brandt, who turned out to have been Sellers' operational liaison for the Bagram compound's compromised elements, negotiated a cooperation agreement with the DIA Oversight Office that would take 18 months to fully process. The man in the detention block was identified. A private contractor with a background in technical operations, connections to 3 different shell companies, and a sealed service record from a unit that no longer officially existed. His death was ruled a homicide. The dispersal device in the HVAC return was matched to a production source that led investigators to a procurement chain that ran through 2 of the shell companies. It was the kind of evidence thread that, pulled correctly, unraveled a great deal of carefully constructed infrastructure. Hartley cooperated. Not fully, not at first, and not without legal negotiation, but eventually, and more completely than anyone expected, possibly because he was 68 and had watched 4 decades of careful work collapse in a single morning, and had arrived at a calculation that cooperation was the only remaining variable he could control. His testimony corroborated Daniel Voss's debrief on the core facts of the Panjshir ambush and the funding structure behind it. It also implicated 3 other individuals whose names had not previously appeared in any accessible record. Baxter called it the most significant closed-session testimony her subcommittee had received in 11 years. None of this was public. None of it was fast. But it moved. Carver surfaced in February. Not dramatically. He sent a message through a secure channel that Maya's compound-issued phone still received, which she found in her locker in a hallway at her school in Virginia on a Tuesday morning between AP Chemistry and a lunch she was already going to be late for. The message was 4 sentences. He was in a position to provide additional documentation to Baxter's office if requested. He understood the professional relationship between them had concluded. He hoped she was well. He said her father had once told him that the best outcome of any long operation was getting the right people home. She read it twice, put the phone in her locker, went to lunch. She didn't respond for 3 days. Then she sent 2 words, Baxter knows, which meant send what you have directly and stay out of my way. He did. Marcus Webb called her in March. She was at the range, a civilian facility outside Alexandria where she'd been shooting since she was 13, the kind of range where the staff knew her and didn't ask unnecessary questions, where the bay she preferred was at the far end and had a natural wind channel that made the conditions honest. She had her phone on the bench beside her, and she picked up because she recognized the number from Cole's contact information, which Webb had apparently acquired. "Hollow Point," he said. "Master Chief?" "My shoulder's at 90%, he said. "Doc says 100 eventually. I told him I was at 100 now, and he told me I was wrong, which, honestly, fair." "Good," she said. "Cole wanted me to tell you the after-action documentation is finalized. 12 confirmed, all verified. It's a clean record." He paused. "I wanted to tell you something else." She waited. "I was wrong about you," he said. "First look, on that ridgeline. I decided what I was seeing before I looked." He said it plainly, without the hedging people usually applied to admissions like this. No, to be fair to myself or given the circumstances. Just, I was wrong. That's a bad habit in my line of work. I'm working on it. She looked at the target downrange. Okay, she said. That's it? Okay. What else is there? A pause. Then, quietly, your father. His record. The confirmed engagements, the formal citations, the work he did before the program that got him killed. It's being reviewed for proper documentation. Baxter's office pushed for it. Cole pushed for it. He paused. His record was incomplete. It was incomplete deliberately because people had reasons to keep his profile low. That's being corrected. She set the rifle down on the bench very carefully. His name gets put back, Webb said, where it belongs. In the right files, with the right citations. Another pause. I thought you should know. She looked at the far end of the range. At the target, small at distance, the kind of distance most people considered unreasonable, and she considered a starting point. Thank you, she said. The two words came out slightly rough at the edges, which she hadn't anticipated and couldn't entirely manage, and she didn't try to smooth it because there was nobody there to see, and Webb had just told her something that had been 3 years in needing to be said. Yeah, Webb said. He didn't make it awkward. He just let it sit there, which was the right thing to do. Take care of yourself, Hollow Point. He hung up. She sat on the bench at the far end of the range for a while without shooting. The wind moved through the channel in the way wind moved when it was honest. Variable, unpredictable, genuinely difficult. Her father had loved wind like that. He'd said a calm range only taught you calm conditions, and the world wasn't mostly calm conditions. She picked up the rifle. She shot for 2 hours. On the last day of the school year, her mother drove from Great Falls to Alexandria to help her move out of the residential program, and they spent 4 hours packing boxes and loading a rental car in the Virginia heat that was nothing like Montana heat. Wetter, heavier, less honest. And at some point during the second hour, somewhere between the desk lamp and the third box of books, her mother sat down on the edge of the stripped mattress and looked at her. Sarah Voss was 44, still had the angular face that Maya had inherited, and had the expression of a person who had been carrying a specific weight for long enough that it had become part of her posture. The academic program, her mother said. Yes, Maya said. Tell me what it actually was. Maya stopped wrapping the desk lamp. She sat down on the floor across from her mother, back against the wall, and looked at her hands for a moment. She told her. Not everything. Not the specifics of every deployment. Not the detailed mechanics of what she'd done in the mountains of Afghanistan in December. But the shape of it. Carver. The training. The work. The reason. What she'd been looking for, and what she'd found, and what it had cost, and what it had returned. Her mother listened without interrupting. This surprised Maya slightly. She'd expected interruption, expected the specific kind of controlled maternal alarm that arrived when a parent discovered the gap between what they'd believed and what was true. But her mother just listened, hands folded in her lap, face doing the complicated work of absorbing a large amount of information that rearranged everything around it. When Maya finished, there was a silence that lasted long enough to be its own kind of answer. Your father, her mother said finally. Yes. He was training you for this. He was training me to be able to, Maya said. I don't think he meant for it to be. I don't think he planned any of what actually happened. I think he taught me what he taught me because he wanted me to be able to take care of myself in a world that he knew could be dangerous. She paused. And then the world got dangerous in a specific way, and the things he taught me turned out to be the right tools. Her mother looked at the window. The Virginia afternoon was pressing against it, green and heavy. He would have been furious, her mother said. I know. And proud. She said the second part more quietly, not as a concession, but as an accurate accounting. Both. In that order. I know that too. Her mother looked at her for a long moment, the way parents looked at children when they were trying to reconcile two versions of the same person, the one they'd known and the one in front of them, and finding that the distance between them was larger and smaller than expected simultaneously. Are you done? Her mother asked. With whatever this was. Maya thought about what she'd told Cole on the perimeter wall. about timing and patience and the difference between stopping and choosing when to move. "I'm going home," she said. "I'm going to apply to colleges. I'm going to figure out what I'm supposed to do with the rest of my life." She met her mother's eyes. "The other thing isn't done. I don't think I'm going to tell you that it is when it isn't." Her mother pressed her lips together, not approving, not surrendering, something in between, the expression of a person deciding that honesty, even unwelcome honesty, was something they could work with. "Your father used to say the same thing," she said, "that he'd tell me when it was done, not before." "Did it help?" "No," her mother said, "but I believed him, which is different from it helping." She stood up and picked up the box she'd been filling. The conversation was over, not resolved, not closed, but arrived at a temporary resting point that both of them recognized as the best available option. Maya watched her carry the box to the door, and then she stood and picked up the desk lamp she'd been wrapping, and they finished packing in the particular companionable silence of people who have just said difficult things and are now giving those things room to settle. They drove home to Montana with the windows down for the first 4 hours, through the green Virginia sprawl, and then the flatter open country, and then the long climb westward where the land started to make sense to Maya again, where the scale came back and the sky got bigger and the distances meant something real. Her mother drove. Maya sat in the passenger seat with her feet on the dash and the green logbook in her lap, not open, just held. "Somewhere in Wyoming," her mother said, "the range at home. Your father's set up in the barn." "Yeah?" "I haven't touched it. Since he died. I just closed it off." She watched the road. "I think it's time to open it back up." Maya looked out at the Wyoming plateau, brown and spare and completely honest about what it was. "Yeah," she said. "I think so too." They didn't say anything else for a long time, but the silence between them was different from the silence it had been at the beginning of the drive. Less weighted, less unresolved. It was the silence of two people pointed in the same direction, moving through open country, with enough road ahead that there was no urgency in figuring out every detail of where it ended. The mountains came up ahead of them in the late afternoon, the Rockies cutting the sky the way they always had. Absolute, indifferent, and exactly where they were supposed to be. Maya looked at them. She thought about a ridgeline in the Hindu Kush and 12 heat signatures and a machine gun that stopped and a helicopter lifting through a blizzard. She thought about a concrete debrief room and a man named Hartley saying you look like him and meaning it as something other than a simple observation. She thought about her father standing at a range in the November cold, watching her shoot and not helping her figure it out because he knew she'd figure it out herself, and what she learned that way would stay with her in a way that handed answers never did. She thought about the patch in her jacket pocket, the logbook in her hands. She thought about all the things she still didn't know and all the things she did, and the particular weight of each. She was 15 years old. She had work left to do and years left to grow into and a mother in the driver's seat who was afraid for her in the honest, unglamorous way that people were afraid for people they loved, not because they didn't believe in them, but because belief didn't make the world less dangerous, and the world was, in fact, dangerous. She knew that better than most people twice her age. She opened the logbook to a blank page near the back, took the pen from her jacket pocket, wrote a single line. Not a shot log, not environmental data, not an observation. DV, his record is restored. The work continues. She capped the pen, closed the logbook, looked at the mountains coming up ahead of them and felt something that wasn't peace exactly, and wasn't satisfaction exactly, but was the feeling of a person who has completed a necessary thing and knows that completion is not the same as ending, only the same as being ready to begin again on better ground. The world is full of people who are decided upon before they're understood, dismissed before they speak, measured by the wrong instruments, told by the size of the room they're given, by the way other people's eyes move past them, that their moment has not arrived yet and perhaps never will. But capacity doesn't wait for permission. It waits for the right conditions. And then it acts. The girl they laughed at on a frozen ridgeline in the Hindu Kush never asked them to believe in her. She just did the work, imperfectly, painfully, at a cost she's still paying, and let the results speak in the only language that people who underestimate others eventually understand. Whatever they've told you about your moment, keep your logbook, keep your calculations. The shot comes when the conditions are right, not when someone else decides you're ready to take it.